We're live? Can't see it.
Yes, you're recording.
Okay. I want to welcome everyone to our February 2021 monthly meeting of the El Dorado Hills Community Council. So as normal, we're going to go ahead and start off by going through our leadership team roll call, and then we'll also do recognition of District 1 Commissioners, committee members present. So with that, I know John Vania has said he will be running a little bit late, so he will be joining us later. Richard, are you there? Can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Richard Ross, good governance, watching, looking, and wondering why.
There you go. I like it. Okay, Chief Lowley, are you there?
Let's see.
Okay, we'll pick him up later. Glenn.
Glenn Krakow, Economic Development Advisory Committee.
Very good. John Davey, I see you there.
Hello, John Davey, Chair of the El Dorado Hills Area Planning Advisory Committee, and we provide resident feedback on proposed development projects in El Dorado Hills to El Dorado County Planning and to the applicants.
Very good. And Tim White, would you go ahead and introduce yourself associated with APAC?
Tim White, Vice Chairman of APAC.
Thank you. Sita, are you there? I'm not seeing you on the screen.
No, let me see if she's in the other. No.
Okay, and then Cindy, why don't you go ahead?
I'm Cindy Munt. I'm Supervisor Heidel's assistant, and I do the community information and outreach for the community council.
Okay, we'll pick up anybody else who joins. Like you said, John Vane, you should be joining soon, but if Chief Lilly and Sita join us, we'll make sure we announce when they arrive. So thank you for that. And then District 1 commissioners and committee members who might be present. I can't see that list from here.
We've got Tita.
Tita, would you please recognize yourself?
Hi, this is Tita Bladen, El Dorado County Commission on Aging.
Thank you.
Wendy May.
Wendy May.
Let me see. Can you unmute Wendy May?
Yes, I can. Wendy May, County Tax Assessor Appeals Board.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hello.
I don't think so.
There he is.
Oh, Vana's here.
Right. I want to finish this, and then we'll go back to Vania.
Sorry.
Anybody else?
No, I don't see.
Okay. So John, please introduce yourself.
John Vania, Planning Commissioner for District 1. I'm the infrastructure lead.
Thank you. All right. With that, we're going to move on to our guest speakers, rather. I'm ahead of my game here. Adoption of the regular meeting agenda. Let's deal with that. So unless there's any changes proposed by the Leadership Council, do we have any? Seeing none, I'm going to accept the agenda as proposed. Public comment. So this is the portion of the meeting we would open it up for anyone who would like to make a comment, ask a question, whatever, of the community council, something that is not on tonight's agenda. So if it's not on the agenda, now would be the appropriate time to go ahead and ask your question. I'll just ask Cindy to read how you do that. If you've joined us recently.
Okay, when we're taking public comment, please be sure you unmute yourself when called upon. If you're joining the meeting by phone, press *9 to indicate a desire to comment, and we will call you by the last 3 digits of your phone number. If you're joining by Zoom, press the raise hand button, and then please voluntarily state your name for the record. Looks like we have Tita.
Tita, please.
That was my mistake, sorry.
Okay, no problem. Anyone for public?
Ron Cassidy.
Ron Cassidy, please.
Don't hear him. Oh. His hand went down.
Okay, he dropped his hand. So is there any public comment?
Doesn't look like it. And Chief Lilly just
And none of the dial-in numbers, obviously. Okay, it looks like we're seeing no public comment. I do want to recognize that Chief Mike Lilienthal has joined us. So Mike, would you tell us what your role is on Community Council, please?
Yes, my name is Michael Lilienthal. I'm a Deputy Chief of El Dorado Hills Fire Department. And I chair the public safety group, and my goal is to try and just network people together when they have a community safety issue, whether it be police or fire or anybody in between, and try and solve the customer's problem.
Excellent, thank you. I guess Sita is the only one we're missing, and maybe she'll be able to join us later. We'll see. With that, I'm going to move on to our guest speakers this evening. And I understand KN is not going to be joining us, so it'll be strictly County Counsel David Livingston. And David is going to be talking to us a little bit about some of the recent legislation, new 2021 laws that would affect housing in El Dorado Hills and El Dorado County. And we'll certainly have a question and answer period after that if you wanted to ask him questions beyond that topic. But we'll start with that. So David, are you ready to go ahead and launch here?
I am. Yeah. Thank you, Supervisor.
Sure.
So I'll start by saying that, back in the days when we all used to get together in a conference room and, learn something in our field, to the extent anyone can even remember what those days were like, the time where the presenter would do a legislative update was often the time when many folks would get up and get a cup of coffee or just kind of mill around a little bit. So I'm going to say that just to kind of apologize that the subject matter can be a bit dry. But nevertheless, at Supervisor Heidal's request, I went over some of the new housing bills that passed in the last legislative session. And depending upon how you count them, there was probably about a dozen bills that affected housing and land use. And I whittled it down to just a small handful that might be most relevant to El Dorado County and in particular the El Dorado Hills community. So with that, I'll go ahead and just kind of launch in. Like I said, I just have a small handful that we'll go through. And then if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them, though I don't purport to be expert in all of these things. And to the extent they're new laws, I'm still getting my arms around it as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and start. One law that's I think might be particularly of interest to the community is AB 2345. AB 2345 amends the state density bonus law. And the state density bonus law, which was enacted way back in the 70s, is intended to encourage cities and counties to offer density bonuses, incentives, and waivers to housing developments that include a certain percentage of affordable units. And so what it does is it rewards a developer who agrees to build a certain percentage of either low, very low, or moderate income units with the opportunity to build more residences than would otherwise be permitted by applicable local regulations. So generally speaking, just by way of background, the affordable tiers that we talk about, very low income, which is would be a household who earns less than 50% of the area median income. Low income is a household that earns less than 80% of the area median income, and moderate income households are those who earn less than 120% of the area median income. And in case you cared to know, according to State Housing and Community Development, the median income for a family of four in El Dorado County is $86,300 a year. So in any event, so AB 2035 comes in and it revises some of the provisions that were already in place that would provide these bonuses. And it does it in a couple of key ways. So first, it takes what used to be a maximum bonus that a developer could receive of 35% additional units, and it ups it all the way up to 50% simply by raising the percentage of either low or very low income units that they've included in their development. So if they increase their very low income units from 11 to 15%, then they can get all the way up to a 50% bonus. Or if they increase their low income units from 20 up to 24%, they can get all the way up to a 50% bonus. So that's one thing. It also, the new bill, the way it's structured is that in addition to the density bonus, it allows for you to get other concessions from the local jurisdiction by way of reduced setbacks or waiver of other local design requirements. And so depending upon how much of your project includes low or very low income housing, it just changes whether you can get 1, 2, 3, or 4 different types of concessions. And so what this bill does is it lowers the thresholds to allow you to get more concessions out of the local jurisdiction. So whereas it used to be you had to have 17% of your development had to include low income in order to qualify for 2 concessions. Now, excuse me, it was 20%, now it's 17%, whereas it used to require that 30% of your development include low income, affordable units for low income households in order to get 3 concessions, down to 24%. So I guess to sum it up, what it's really doing is it's further encouraging the development of affordable housing by lowering the thresholds that a developer would need to reach in order to get more concessions, in order to make their development easier to build and to increase the number of units that they'd be allowed to build. So that's AB 2345.
The effectiveness, David, is that with the first of the year?
Yes. So all of these bills except for one took effect January 1 of this year. In fact, the next bill I'm going to get to, it was deemed an urgency statute, so it took effect when it was signed into law back in September.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and so that next bill is AB 831. And so AB 831 makes some changes to legislation that I'm sure some of you who are kind of following some of the recent housing legislation are familiar with. It's called SB 35. I know Commissioner Vane is very well familiar with that after having dealt with it at the Planning Commission. So SB 35 is a bill that went into effect a few years back, and it essentially imposes a streamlined approval process for certain multifamily affordable housing projects. So for example, it states that this is SB 35, mind you, that if so long as a development is consistent with objective zoning standards and meets other requirements, then it's essentially treated as a ministerial project, which means it goes through a very expedited review process. It would be traditionally exempt from environmental review. So it's really intended to kind of encourage and streamline the development of affordable multifamily projects. Well, AB 831 makes a few changes to SB 35. One main thing it does is that it adds new requirements to ensure that jurisdictions don't use a post-approval review process to impose restrictions that would impede one's ability to develop the multifamily project. So jurisdictions may have been, when a project gets approved and before it gets its final building permit, it may need to come back to the jurisdiction for some additional review and approval. Well, there was concern that jurisdictions were going to use that process as a means of then stalling the development of that ministerial project that should have been, again, streamlined and ready to move quickly. And so what this does is that it makes it so that the jurisdiction cannot essentially impose additional restrictions on that for those minor modifications to the project. It does have a couple of guardrails that it puts up. So if, for example, the number of units in the project increased by more than 15%, then the county would be able to impose some additional requirements. But generally speaking, it's trying to just further the streamlining of these ministerial multifamily projects. One other thing that the bill does, it recognizes that sometimes these projects get approved and they're dependent upon construction of offsite infrastructure for the project. So they need a sewer line brought to their project, or they need a road connection made. And so oftentimes the developer is going to be burdened with having to get those offsite improvements done. Well, again, some jurisdictions were utilizing that kind of other approval process as a means of further slowing down the construction of these multifamily projects. And so what this does is it requires that those offsite improvement projects be approved without delay and in a manner that doesn't chill or preclude the development of the multifamily project. It also clarifies just one final point that mixed use development is eligible for the streamlined approval as long as it meets certain requirements. All right, so moving on. So I'm going to move on now to AB 1851. This one is I'll be honest, it was such a targeted bill. It seemed unusual to me. It was referred to as the Yes in God's Backyard bill, YIGB. And what it does is it makes it easier for faith-based organizations to build affordable housing in their own parking lots. So apparently the legislature had recognized that many places of worship have parking lots that are only used a few times a week. And so some of the faith communities express an interest in developing those lots for affordable housing. Unfortunately, they would oftentimes run into problems with the local county or city based upon restrictive parking requirements. And so they were essentially unable to remove parking to develop some type of housing because they needed that parking to meet their parking requirements for their worship services. And so what this bill does is it essentially eliminates it makes it so that a faith-based developer could eliminate up to 50% of their existing parking without having to replace it, so long as they're using that for this purpose of developing affordable housing. So it's again, just a very targeted bill. Clearly, there was some issue that these faith-based organizations had been facing, and this bill is intended to kind of overcome some of those barriers that they'd had to development of affordable housing. So continuing the theme, just slightly different focus, AB 2782. This bill relates to the conversion of mobile home parks. It's my understanding that the mobile home parks has been a focus of discussion of this group, and particularly rent control. What this bill does is it recognizes that there's an increasing economic push to try to convert the use of mobile homes to other potentially more economically valuable uses. And so what this does is that it imposes certain requirements on a park owner or park manager who are seeking to change the use of a mobile home park. According to the author of the bill, it fortifies the conversion process. It increases the notice provisions, compensation requirements for displaced residents, and requiring conversion impact reports. So, for example, what it does is the manager of the mobile home park is required to provide at least 60 days, whereas it previously was 15 days notice that management's going to be appearing before a local board to obtain approval for a change in use. It requires the preparation of a conversion impact report that has to include a replacement and relocation plan for displaced residents and contain fair market value in place appraisals for the homes of those residents. I think you're all aware that mobile home parks face or create a really unique set of issues because they rent the space, but the person owns the mobile home. So what this does is that it ensures that a fair market value appraisal of the mobile home is done, and that a plan, if that resident cannot be relocated, a plan is in place in order to buy out the resident's interest in that mobile home. And also, it just makes some additional changes just to conform some of the law with the Subdivision Map Act to make sure that there's no loophole. So it regardless of the manner in which the use is change in use is happening, these requirements will come in order to ensure that these additional protections are in place. Oh, actually, you know what? I want to go back just a second. I did want to touch on this with the AB 1851. So that was the bill that I talked about the development of affordable housing in church parking lots. Even though I just wanted to just provide this just for context, even though it essentially removes one barrier to development of those types of properties through this ability to remove certain parking standards, I did want to make clear that there still would be objective zoning requirements that would still be applicable to that type of development. Some of you who are familiar with land use have heard of the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, and that essentially means that we can't, as government, we can't impose a burden or regulation on religious uses that would substantially burden the religious exercise, but it still does allow for the imposition of permitting requirements or requests for zoning changes. So I just don't want you to think that there's going to be a big run on the market for developing housing in church parking lots. There still would be a planning process that would be applicable to that. But with this new bill, the parking requirements would no longer be an obstacle to such development. And just to close out, just one final thing I wanted to make note of. I know you oftentimes see at the Planning Commission, you see requests to extend certain housing entitlements, particularly subdivision maps that may be approved by the Planning Commission. As a result of the economic downturns associated with the COVID, the legislature enacted AB 1561 that extends the vast majority of housing entitlements for an additional 18 months. So it just gives people more time to act on those housing entitlements that have been previously approved. So I want to end there. I did want to just kind of note, in case it wasn't apparent, there's there was a bit of a theme to some of this new legislation, and that is that the state, and it seems like this happens every year, the state just keeps taking additional steps to encourage the development of affordable housing. And to the extent they've been dissatisfied with local jurisdictions that have been putting up barriers to that development, you can see, as they've done here with taking away removing parking standards and other things, that they're more than willing to take away a local jurisdiction's ability to put up those barriers. So this is a consistent theme. We see it from legislative session to legislative session. And so just be mindful of that the slate of laws that we had in this last session are somewhat indicative of a trend with the legislature to strongly encourage the development of affordable housing. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Questions from anybody on the panel?
Yeah, David, Tim White.
Tim, I knew I could count on you, Tim.
Okay, thank you.
One lawyer to another.
There you go.
Always a lawyer jokes, John. AB 2345 on the concessions that can be granted are on the density side. Are these automatic concessions that the county has to give a developer, or are these negotiable, or are they mandatory and the county has no choice but to give them if the developer meets the threshold levels?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So they are essentially entitled to these things so long as they meet the thresholds. They will, generally the process works such that the developer will submit an application to the county, and they will describe their project, and they will include within it their request for which concessions they are seeking. So that is essentially, we are required to grant that. But bear in mind too, that as a condition of getting these things, they're required to ensure that the project remains affordable. So they're required to deed restrict the property, or at least those units that are subject to the affordability, for a period of 55 years. So they're making a pretty significant commitment to develop and commit the property to an affordable use.
Thank you.
Hey, Dave, haven't seen you in a while. My first question is, when you lose your razor? And
December 31st.
Oh, all right. Well, on a serious note, it's good to see you. But and of course, I know Bree has given you a download, and all the stress I've been causing her on SB 35 myself. But are you hearing from other agencies any kind of pushback on this affordable housing push? And I take a hard line in that they're taking away our land use authority on a local level. And so have you heard of any pushback from any local jurisdictions, any lawsuits and stuff that's coming forward to kind of fight back on this effort from the state to kind of, in a sense, force this on us?
I haven't heard anything specifically, which is not to say that something hasn't been happening out there. I'm sure that there are some jurisdictions that are starting to push back. As I noted, this is not a new thing. It's been, every year it seems like there's a slate of bills that are really taking away some local authority with respect to affordable housing. It'll be interesting to see how things pan out. As you know, we're in the process of updating our housing element for the next 8-year cycle. So it'll be interesting to see what comes of that and what comes of the HCD review.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you, Dave. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from panelists? I'm not seeing any. Questions from call-in.
I don't see any hands up.
Okay, I want to thank you, David, for the summary of what's going on with the state. We'll get more next year, like you alluded to. Every year there's a new series of bills that get processed. Some of them pass and get signed by the governor. Some of them pass the legislature and get vetoed by the governor. And some of them just kind of go away. But most of them keep coming back with some kind of a modified version. So we'll just stay tuned and try to monitor this stuff and figure out what we have to do as a county to adjust our current policies and other things to make this all work. And SB 35, as you mentioned, I think is a major test of how all that gets played out at the individual project level. So we will see. But again, I appreciate your time, your effort, and have a wonderful evening. You're welcome to stay if you want, but have a wonderful evening. I know you got to run.
I don't know. I might hang around for a bit, but thank you for having me. I do appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your discussion tonight.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Take care.
So I did want to recognize that Sita Burgess has joined us. Sita, are you still there? Would you please introduce what your role is on the leadership team for Community Council?
Thank you. Sorry, I had some technical issues. I'm Sita Burgess. I'm here in El Dorado Hills. I'm a registered nurse, and I'm the Healthy Communities Liaison. So I'm working with Supervisor Heidel, Cindy in this panel to keep the community updated in various public health issues and other community concerns.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to Supervisor Communications, and I'm going to be reading some information that came out from a recently published at the county level COVID-19 vaccine frequently asked questions. So I am going to ask Cindy to make sure that this is a link when we put together our minutes, so everybody will have access to it and may not have seen it yet. But the bottom line is, until we receive additional vaccine from the state, we cannot schedule more appointments. We are currently booked through mid-February at both the county public health offices and Safeway pharmacies. At that point, we plan to hold some 65 plus only and 75 plus only drive-through clinics as we receive shipments from the state. And there's a website you can check to get more information on that. So clearly in El Dorado County, we're trying to focus and emphasis on getting clinics set up for 75 and over, 65 and over as part of that mix. One of the things that I did want to mention here is the county has briefly provided a service to be alert for surplus vaccine. We suspended that service after more than 22,000 people signed up. These are kind of first come, first serve if there's surplus vaccine rather than having it go waste. This is your quick notice. You can get to a facility within an hour and get scheduled. We had to shut down that sign off after we had 22,000 reservations. The state has only provided us 19,785 doses of the vaccine in total to date, all of which are earmarked for appointments already done and those scheduled through mid-February. We're working through the appointments, and again, we're doing the 65 and 75 drive-through. So we are fully ready as a county. We have a lot of people who can do the vaccinations. We have a lot of support from community members and our fire departments and everything else to run the clinics as we get them. And we know Safeway is participating, Walgreens, I think it is participating. But the issue is we don't have enough vaccine to do the planned vaccination. So we're in a hold mode until we get a bigger supply. And I'm going to talk about the second item then, because recognizing that the Board of Supervisors had a discussion at last week's meeting. Was it last week? Yeah, it was last week. And discussed what can we do. And we decided to send a letter to the governor asking for additional allocations of the doses for the vaccine, given the fact that El Dorado County has the most senior population of any county in the state. Our high number of seniors, 65 and over, 75 and over, would certainly indicate that a proper distribution of vaccine for the elderly would be based upon your population of those residents, not just the general population of your county or city. So we sent a letter asking for consideration to please increase our distribution consistent with what our senior population is, as opposed to just our general population. So we've sent several letters to the governor in the past. Unfortunately, the history is we've not even received recognition of receipt. So we'll keep sending the letters, but I'm guessing we won't hear anything back. And that's very disappointing, but that's the state that we're in. So we are doing everything we can at the Board of Supervisors level. We're working with CSAC, the California State Association of Counties. We're working with RCRC. We're sending letters in where we're not getting enough doses. They've got to make the system of distribution and accountability better. But to date, it's
John, I think we lost you. I can't hear him. How about you guys?
No.
There's no microphone in the room there.
Yeah, John, we can't hear you. So anyone got any good jokes?
What's the Beatles song about Earth to Captain John? What's that? Can't think of that Beatles line.
Well, I can share a few things on the same topic, but.
Go ahead.
Go
I'll
ahead.
take over.
Go ahead. Okay. So,
Revolution.
about where John was going, some other things here. So I've been attending what's called it's with the state CDPH, that's the Department of Public Health for California. They have this Community Vaccine Advisory Committee. I'm attending those meetings via Zoom where they have different kind of special interest groups representing like teachers, home healthcare workers, different like minorities, seniors, all kinds of things. And this is one of the ways that they are establishing their allocation and distribution from the state level. So it was pretty complicated for a while, and that's why you heard news reports of doses getting wasted and things. So then they increased it to all 65-year-olds plus. So if you're 65 or older, and that really increased the amount of people who are eligible. And then again, we're running into the supply issues. So that's what John's mentioning is we are not getting enough supplies. And so the county is to keep things organized, so whether people are signing up through like Safeway or the El Dorado Fires Department's doing sometimes the senior days. I'm not going to steal Mike's thunder because he should share with you his success from that day. It's really, really great. But the county is only allocating appointments for vaccines when they know, depending on how many supplies they have on hand. So they're not allowing for future appointment dates if they don't know if they're going to have vaccines available. So it's important that people continue to check back to the website. And we are out of the regional stay-at-home. Oh, is he there? Do you hear him?
Oh, wait.
We got your back, Cindy. Why don't you go ahead and finish Cedar while you're talking?
Oh, okay.
That's okay.
So we left the people, if you guys remember, we had the regional stay-at-home orders that was really more of a regional based structure where the state was looking at had several counties in one region. There were 5 regions in total, and we just exited that a few weeks ago. So we're back to the blueprint and we're in the purple tier. So that's where we were before, where we moved along according to what's going on in our local county with our numbers of test positivity rates and those sort of things. I'm getting some feedback and communicating with some of our senior folks, and it's good to know the county is going to continue prioritizing and working with Mike. And they have some concerns about how the different health plans are notifying them, because we have a lot of seniors, as John was saying, significant percentage of our population, I think it's over 30%, and many have disabilities, macular degeneration, they can't see, might have hearing or cognitive issues. So something that's come up is wanting to know, hey, how is each health plan, like Kaiser, UC Davis, Sutter, Dignity, how are they notifying their members when they're eligible? And we did release some information about what they were doing as of 2 weeks ago. And each health plan is doing it a little differently. Some are emailing, some are calling, some are sending letters in the mail. So that's something that it might be nice if that was streamlined in a way, because it improves our communication out to our local communities to let them know if healthcare plans are doing it in a similar way. So a couple more things is just right now the county is going to be notifying people if you received your first dose already through a county public health clinic, whether Moderna or the Pfizer. They are working to notify people in early February for ways to schedule your second dose. So look out for that. And I'm attending some opioid coalition meetings. We've had some increases in substance and opioid issues here. And there's one thing that's came up is a lot of counterfeit pills are flooding in again. So those are medications that are made to look like something like a morphine pill or a Vicodin or other controlled substance medication, but it'll have fentanyl in it. And people are making these in their basement. They're using all kinds of substances in there. And what's scary about it is fentanyl is a very toxic medication, the lethal dose. It would be very hard to measure that. So that's something we want to just be mindful of. And some good news that is physicians are going to have an easier time to treat people who have opioid dependency, because our state HHS department has gotten rid of this X waiver, where what that means essentially is that physicians don't need to get special certification to treat people that are suffering with opioid, with a medication type of assisted medication route, something like buprenorphine. Last thing I want to talk about is the Holy Trinity School here in El Dorado Hills. They're a K-8 school. They have been volunteering graciously for our senior population, especially those at memory care facilities, for years. And because of COVID, these people are very isolated. It's a very challenging time. And the school council, the students themselves have organized this kind of outreach program, and they're also incorporating the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And what they're doing is they're taking donations in right now and using resources that have contacts with nurseries. So they're going to deliver flowering plants to elders living in assisted living, and particularly memory care. And they're making homemade Valentine's Day cards. And they're going to donate. So out of every $5 that's donated, they're going to give $2 to the Make-A-Wish Foundation, $2 to the senior kind of flowering plant and supplies for the cards, and $1 for Teachers Appreciation Day, which is this Friday. So it's kind of a nice outreach the students are doing for our community. And if anyone's interested in donating, they will be taking donations through next week. And you can make that out to the address you can look online. It's 3115 Tierra de Dios Drive in El Dorado Hills. And you can also hand deliver, cash or check to them. And you can reach out to us or me if you'd like more information.
Very good. Can you hear us now?
Yep.
Okay, because we lost the audio, obviously, and we've had difficulties on this end with connectivity. It gets this loud buzz and we have to restart everything. So my apologies for the technical difficulties if we have a problem with the unit here at the county offices, but we'll look into that. But did you hear anything I said about the road maintenance funding?
No.
Okay. So it left off after the letter to the governor about COVID. Okay, so the last subject I wanted to cover was the Board of Supervisors had a discussion in our last board meeting about finding ways of taking discretionary funding and focusing on road maintenance. So we talked about use of tribe funds. It's like $3.5 million a year, pulling off a portion of that, dedicating it to road maintenance. We talked about TOT funding. And since part of the policy with TOT funding is it's supposed to address the impacts of tourism, and certainly road wear and tear and all those things are impacts of tourism, particularly South Lake Tahoe, Highway 49, and the Coloma, American River, Coloma area, all those kinds of things. So I'm hopeful we'll be able to find a way of taking some of those TOT taxes, dedicating it to road maintenance. And then the third thing, looking harder at SB1 and seeing what we can do to try to get some of the discretionary funds out of SB1 and bring that. But there is a concerted effort to try to find money that we can dedicate back into road maintenance. Now, whether that's on an annual basis or a certain amount every year to be adjusted, I don't know how it's all going to play out, but I just want people to know we're not ignoring, from the Board of Supervisors perspective, road maintenance. We've got to do something there because the state funding, and they're supposed to pay for road maintenance, is insufficient. It's kind of like the vaccine. It's insufficient to get the job done. So the county is looking at ways of stepping up and supplementing what the state's supposed to be paying for. So I'll leave it at that. Any questions from the panelists on anything that I tried to address?
John, on the road maintenance funding, it's the TOT tax is a relative amount. It goes up and down a little bit each year.
Actually, it's increasing, Tim, because we're getting now more VHRs that we're actually getting them to pay the TOT tax that was long overdue.
Okay.
And the contract with Airbnb, because voluntarily they weren't paying our treasurer tax collector. So we lost a lot of revenue for several years. So
is that additional revenue going to make up the portion that you're going to want to take out of the TOT to road maintenance fund? I guess what I'm saying, you're not going to be taking out money that was used for TOT for veterans and all the other activities that the TOT supported.
Well, we changed the policy. The veterans, for instance, used to be a flat 5% of TOT. The board undid that and said, we're not going to do a flat amount because the number on the TOT tax is raising. And we're not sure that there's substantiation, justification for automatic increases to the programs they fund. So we are continuing to fund them, but it's always a by request. Let's review it. Let's see what the budget has to be, as opposed to that automatic 5%, which was there in the past. So again, that's going to free up some money as time goes on here. So I'm not sure what we're going to be able to pull out of TOT for this, given the other things that TOT funds. But it might be as much as $1 million a year, and that's a help.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Hey, for clarity, what is TOT?
Transient occupancy tax. It's the hotel motel tax you pay. A lot of campgrounds charge for it. It's basically a traveler tax, which for the most part, the impact is the people who are coming from other areas into our county and staying in our hotels, motels, the various types of lodging. Like I said, some of the campgrounds have it. If it's an improved campground, an RV park, those kinds of things, they pay TOT typically. But it's any of those rentals, VHR, vacation home rentals, pay TOT. So that's the source of the revenues. And like I said, probably 90% of it's out of county people who come to our county to visit. Okay, any other questions from the panelists?
Yeah, I was going to ask one real quick. Ron Cassidy had tried to get in during public comment. His microphone's not working. He is on his phone now. Do you want him to wait till the end of the meeting? Oops, did we lose you again?
No, we can go back to, and this would be a good time to go back and pick up Ron's comment since he wasn't able to do it. Let's go ahead and pick up Ron's.
He's at 306.
306, thank you.
Let me see, what is that? *6?
Yeah, *6, Ron.
*6, yes.
Got it. Good evening, gentlemen, ladies. This is Ron Cassidy with Bridlewood Canyon, and I was inquiring about a volunteer group or organizing a volunteer group for roadside cleanup along Bass Lake Road, and I wanted to find out who I could contact regarding that. Looking for safety vests, trash bags, what do we do with the trash after we get it picked up, those kind of questions. That's what I was asking about.
Ron, the person to talk to is Brian Mullins in our Department of Transportation. He coordinates all those things. It's a coincident, but I'm trying to schedule an annual, but we're going to have a spring cleanup for Silver Valley Parkway. That's what DOT recommended is the safest roadway to do that, because they want to make sure you're off the roadway enough. They have vehicles out there with lights on it. You wear the safety vest. I'm not sure if they will allow Bass Lake Road to be done, given there's no shoulder, the narrowness of it. We could certainly talk to them about that, but we're already planning one on Silver Valley Parkway. It'd be great to do Green Valley Road. It'd be great to do a lot of these, but DOT is really telling us they have to have a safe environment when they put volunteers out to do that, because it's a liability issue. So, but yeah, Brian Mullins, and I can give you Brian's, or Cindy can give you Brian's extension. You can probably just text it to you. I probably got it here. Let me just take 1 second.
Hey, John.
Yes.
So this summer, a couple of our local residents out here, Don Sanders and Sue Hawks, worked to coordinate some cleanup days on Beatty Drive.
Yes.
And they worked with the CSD, who came and donated some gloves and trash bags. And so that might be another potential, because CSD has been working out there at Bass Lake. So maybe it could be another option.
Yeah, and I know they work around the parks and stuff. I'm not sure that they do the long strips of roadway, like Bass Lake Road, the whole road. But it certainly wouldn't hurt. But I'll give you Brian Mullins' office number. It's 530-642-4924. So dial.
Thank you. Thank you very much, John. Thank you, group. Appreciate the information. I'll be in contact with them.
Because it keeps shutting me off, so I'm done. Hope you got the phone number, Ron, did you?
Yeah.
Okay,
I
good.
did. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm going to move on now to our leadership team progress reports, and we'll start with public safety. Is there anybody representing our sheriff's department this evening?
Yeah, Morton's on.
Oh, Morton.
Okay, very
Yeah,
good.
there he is.
Welcome. Please go ahead and share your report with us. This is Troy, is that correct?
No, it's Alex.
No, it's Alex.
Alex, okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
There he is.
thank you, Alex.
Hi, thank you. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Alex Morton. I'm a detective with the sheriff's office. I do have some stats for the past 2 weeks that we put together. So from January 14th to the 27th, we've had a total of 18 cases out of El Dorado Hills. Those are just property crimes cases, because that's what I track. So those cases include, we had a case of a theft to a cluster mailbox on Montrose Way. We had a vehicle burglary in Town Center, another one off of 2100 Valley View Parkway. We also had 2 homes that were under construction were burglarized. It looks like they're the tankless water heaters were taken. A couple more vehicle burgs. Some of those vehicle burglaries are from unlocked vehicles as well. We had 2 thefts from garages that were left open overnight. We did have a stolen vehicle that it looks like it did some damage to the gate at the Promontory Point neighborhood. Let's see, we had a couple more, another vehicle burglary in the Target parking lot. And that kind of pretty much sums it up. So again, I mean, we continue to deal with the vehicle burglaries. Some of these, like I said, there was a number of these that were unlocked vehicles, so might have been able to be prevented just by locking up the door. But nonetheless, I mean, we still do get many window smashes. So just remind everybody to take those items out of the vehicles. I did want to bring up too, I have noticed sort of an uptick in scams, like phone scams. So I did want to bring that up. We did actually have a case out of El Dorado Hills and Blackstone, actually, where a lady was scammed for a very, very large sum of money. This one was a little unique because it started out with the typical, gift cards, and it transitioned to Bitcoin, and then it transitioned to actually dropping physical money at a location in El Dorado Hills. Luckily, we were able to intervene, and we did set up a sting operation, and we did actually take 2 individuals into custody that were from the East Coast that were flying all over the country doing this stuff. So nonetheless, I just want to bring it up because it seems like it's happening a lot more often. So number one, the big thing is the sheriff's office, any law enforcement agency for that matter, is never going to call you and ask for money. That's not what we do. So if you ever get that is a scam, hang up immediately. Some of these people are a little sophisticated. They did spoof our phone number. Meaning the sheriff's office phone number. They did spoof a DEA office out in El Paso, Texas. So just be aware of that. So just because it comes up in your caller ID as the sheriff's department, it may not be. Don't hesitate to always hang up and call our dispatch directly, just to be able to verify that. But again, we never ask for money especially over the phone. So just be aware of that. Beyond that, that's kind of all I've got for today.
Alex, I have a question. We've been reading, I've seen a lot on Nextdoor about catalytic converters being stolen. And I read somebody was apprehended in El Dorado County who was add those kinds of tools, and I guess catalytic converters. Do you think that that's pretty much stopped that epidemic, I'll call it?
So we, John, I'm glad you brought that up. We have been dealing with the catalytic converter issue for the past few months, and it is an issue that's mainly plaguing the El Dorado Hills and Cameron Park area of our county. Now we did arrest 2 individuals probably about 2 weeks ago now that did have a couple of catalytic converters that they had just cut off. They had all of the tools involved. So luckily our patrol, they stopped them, and they got us and detectives involved right away. So we, in addition to taking them into custody, we in detectives, we rolled down to their place in Sac, ended up and did some searches in Sacramento County to follow up with this. I will tell you, just because we got these 2 individuals, that is likely not going to stop the problem, unfortunately. From what we're seeing is they're going after the precious metals in these catalytic converters.
The platinum, yep.
Yeah, there's a few different types of metals in there that they're going after, and kind of the story that I'm getting is they're cutting them off and they're taking them to a fence down in Sacramento. They're getting $700, $800, $900 in some cases for one catalytic converter. Now, that's really good money for a drug addict. So they are more than inclined to just come up for wherever. I mean, it's happening all over, but they come up and they, for 5 minutes of work, they score $800. So it's not an isolated just one group or one group of people that's doing it. It's everybody, and unfortunately, I don't think that that's going to change until I would assume maybe the cost of precious metals go down. I will say though that we in the sheriff's office, me and my partner, are working with other agencies in and around the Sacramento area, not to mention the FBI. And we do have some leads that will hopefully, well, soon we're going to be executing some search warrants and doing a lot more follow-up to this, and hopefully that will also curb some of this problem too.
Thank you, Alex. Other questions from the panelists or comments? Got a couple of them up there.
From panelists?
I thought there was. Okay. Nobody panel. All right, so let's go to dial in. Any questions for Lieutenant Morton? It is, right? Detective Morton. That's what.
Detective, yeah, Detective Morton.
Probably the best way to do it. Yeah.
Can I have one question real quick? Are the home video surveillance footage that you get, is any of that useful ever?
Yeah, sometimes it is and sometimes it's not. It just kind of depends. So just take, for instance, if you have surveillance on your home, that's good. However, if it shows a shadowy figure coming up your driveway and getting into your car, it may not be useful to me. It just may not. If I'm not able to make out any kind of distinctive characteristics, distinguishable clothing or tattoos or anything, because the chances are I might not be able to make out a good facial profile from that camera footage. However, sometimes it also is good. If I have a series of burglaries in the neighborhood, maybe your footage can maybe fill in a hole for something else, for a neighbor down the street, or maybe your footage catches a car that drives by, even though it was your neighbor's house that got burned. So it is valuable. We always do want that, and we do want to look for that. However, it may not be, it may not be helpful. I guess what I'm saying, it just depends.
Can I follow up with one more just on that topic? That's great information.
Yeah.
Are there any, I know other cities and townships have piloted this type of concept of sort of utilizing people, giving people the opportunity to share or upload their information as an option, even if there's not a crime, but it could go into, say, your sheriff's offices, and that then you can access it if there's a nearby crime, like for what you're saying, if you wanted to see if someone was coming through, or I know there's certainly some privacy issues potentially, but would anything like that be helpful if there was kind of a platform that you were able to access?
Yeah, I would definitely say it probably would be helpful. I think that there might be some challenges to that, but one of the things that I always tell people and is if you see something that's like kind of weird or suspicious, you can pick up the phone and you can call our dispatch, and it generates a call. Even if a deputy doesn't get dispatched, it generates a call for service. And what that does is, what I do from my desk, what I do is if I have a burglary on a certain street and I don't have any leads, I have really nothing to go off of. One of the things I'll do is I'll look back, probably within that day or a day or two, and look at the calls for service that are on that street, because maybe someone called in a suspicious vehicle with two people in it that never been seen in the neighborhood before, and so that might be my lead. So at least if you guys call that stuff in, like I said, even if it's nothing, even if we don't dispatch a deputy, at least it kind of logs it in there, and we can look back on that, and maybe it's something, maybe it's nothing, but yeah, as far as like a greater, a different type of system, or like, any application, or we don't have that, and that might be something to look into. I don't know.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So with any dial-ins that have a question for Detective Morton?
I don't see any hands up.
All right. Alex, thank you very much for your report. Really appreciate it. So
Thank you, sir.
keep on keeping on. Yep.
Thank you.
So with that, let's go to our CHP report. Is
Yes.
Andrew with us? Okay.
Yeah, there he is.
All right. Officer Brown, welcome.
Where is he?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, there he is.
Yeah, you're coming fine.
A lot of background noise. Sorry. Hi. So I'm Officer Brown with the California Highway Patrol here in Placerville. In case any of you all don't know who we are and who I am. So we just got through this wonderful storm. As you all could imagine, it was kind of crazy out there for us on the roadways, but surprisingly, we got some messaging out. It's hard to message or hard to measure how effective those messages were to the public, but we can see the fruit of that. There wasn't a lot of traffic backups. This was not a snowmageddon as it was back a couple of years ago up in Pollock Pine. So, and luckily it didn't correspond with a travel holiday weekend. So I think we skated pretty well for this week for the snow. And then also we're getting into the brand new year. We kind of hit the reset button on statistics and kind of gathering new statistics and where we're at for the year. So we're down in traffic collisions, but we're also down in DUI. So that's a proper ratio. We're actually ratioed exactly the same as last year as ratio of DUIs to collisions. So we're right where we were last year. I just want to kind of talk to the demographics of El Dorado Hills and DUI and things like that. So DUI is still continues to be in California a leading cause of death for the people of California, for innocent victims all over the country. With Super Bowl coming up this next Saturday or Sunday, I just want to encourage everyone to make a plan if you plan on drinking. An interesting phenomenon that happens inside our inner ear. So when in your vestibular system, when alcohol is introduced in there, you feel that in your motions when you're impaired by alcohol. What happens is that system, you get an effect where when you start sobering up, you get an illusion that you're more sober than you actually are because of that inner ear issue. And also the alcohol lasts in that fluid longer than it does in your bloodstream. So I just want to encourage people, please, if you are drinking, you think you're okay, just do some quick math in your head, and maybe you're probably not, and just plan ahead on making that trip with a sober driver home if you're going somewhere for the Super Bowl. Also, just for everyone else out there, Sita mentioned, the opiate issues, opiate crisis nationwide that's going on. It's highly political. There's a lot of stuff going on in the news this last week with treatment options and legalities in the federal government. I just want to encourage everyone to encourage those people to avoid that beast for opiates, especially when it comes to impairment when driving. And also, it doesn't have to be just opiates. There's a lot of things in prescribed medications and mood enhancers, Xanax and things like that are a drug of common abuse. You could have 1 or 2 glasses of Chardonnay and pop that Xanax pill and you'll be going all day. And that's a cheap buzz, and you're going to be looking great for that, for on the boat this summer because you're not drinking as much calories, but that's a thing. So we need to make sure that we're minding our medications if we're taking them, so that they don't become an option of abuse for those around us. And then also minding our own and having that courageous conversation with somebody that you believe could be abusing those medications and driving while under the influence of them. So just have that courageous conversation, be brave with each other when we're talking about those medications of abuse and alcohol together. So that's about it. I would like to open it up to, any questions that we had. I know we had questions about personnel numbers. I'm still trying to find an answer to that from last month. I don't know why why it's taking so long to get an answer, but welcome to the state government. So any questions about this weekend or upcoming things that we might have going on?
Andrew, when you mentioned DUIs, one of the things, obviously, most people think alcohol, but DUIs now are measured in combinations, alcohol and substance, and pure alcohol. So there's kind of 3 categories the way I've understood it. And we're seeing more and more of the combination you talked about, which is substance and alcohol combined.
That's right. So Lieutenant McGorry of the California Highway Patrol, he's a retired officer or a lieutenant when this happened, but his son, we attended the classmate together. He was killed down in Barstow by an impaired driver on marijuana. He was sitting in his patrol car. The impaired driver on marijuana crossed over wrong way, hit him head on while his partner was outside of the vehicle writing a ticket. He killed him instantly there. And his father, the retired lieutenant, kind of strove, and with his knowledge of the inner workings of vehicle code and things like that, he introduced some legislation, help introduce some legislation to get better tracking of DUI, alcohol, and the combination of both. So therefore, those vehicle code sections are now separated out. So when they're charged and adjudicated, they're much easier to track with just a kind of a keystroke as to was that person under the influence of alcohol, drugs, or combination. So that does make it easy for statistical tracking. And we're seeing benefits of that. We're getting more funding for DUI education when it comes to drugs for DREs. Our area has proportionally a large number of drug recognition experts within our area. And that includes additional testing that our officers do upon the arrest of somebody who's suspected of being under the influence of a controlled substance. It could be in a combination of alcohol as well. And it includes cannabis, all the things that could potentially be recreationally legal. So we're having good success with the district attorney's office for prosecution. It used to be around the state, you wouldn't hear of a prosecution of a green DUI, meaning just marijuana only DUI, but we're seeing that right and left all over the state. A lot of political and grant, funding from MAD, pressure on the district attorneys to push that, but also promoting and funding of education of our officers to be able to determine impairment when it comes to DUI in that realm.
My understanding is the THC contents, the potency, if you will, of the marijuana today is totally different than it was years ago. And so people who remember the 60s and 70s and marijuana today is a totally different product. And it is much more controlling in terms of all kinds of things, hallucinations, et cetera, et cetera. So we're dealing with something different than what originally started as. So
Yeah, so we have very, 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 very limited studies when it comes to THC intoxication and driving effects and performance on field sobriety tests. The ones that we do have, they're based on very low THC levels in the single digits of percentiles of THC levels. What we're producing right now, what's being grown in fields or inside houses in fact, El Dorado County today is in the 20s to 30s. El Dorado County has award-winning strains growing here based on the high levels of THC. And these high levels of THC have not been medically studied to a point where we can pick an actual number, like alcohol is 0.08 for a presumptive limit. We're not there with our science, and universities that haven't been able to get there with their studies. So what we're seeing is earlier onset psychosis in youths or young adults, and also an extreme amount of side effects. So cannabis and THC increases your heart rate, your blood pressure, and those things in combination with likely pre-existing conditions with your heart or hypertension can have some pretty serious effects, especially with chronic use and a sudden use of a very high potent rate. And we're not even talking about concentrates, which are kind of the cannabis du jour, where those can go in the 80 percentile plus of THC levels. So it's everywhere. It's recreationally legal for those over 21. And we are putting people in jail for it all the time. So it's not something that's going away. It's the new normal in California, and we're positioned well to attack it here in El Dorado County on the California Highway Patrol's enforcement side. So we're pretty proud of how many DREs we have, and also how many DUI arrests we do make for cannabis and other controlled substance impairment.
thank you for the additional commentary. So appreciate it.
Yep.
Panelists, any other questions or comments for Andrew?
One more quick one. Andrew, you're saying that it's been advantageous to have more training for officers, which makes a lot of sense with the way drugs and designer drugs are changing all the time to recognize if someone's under the influence and they're driving. Does that require, I mean, you can't do a breathalyzer, right, for marijuana or Xanax. So is there would you guys have to take a blood test, or how do you guys?
Yeah. So for cannabis, right now, there's a lot of companies, because obviously there's going to be money in it. If a company can develop a presumptive test. So a presumptive test is like a preliminary alcohol screening device test, which you blow into on the side of the road that measures the alcohol content. There's presumptive tests being developed for cannabis from oral fluid, or also a facial swab to deal with the oils, because it's oil soluble. And our department is testing those and getting, with that, but the science is catching up. And the final say would be that blood test at the conclusion of the arrest for cannabis or any other controlled substance other than alcohol.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Did we lose John again?
We might have.
Might have.
So maybe it'd be a good time for Lily to go.
Yep, I'll just go on for the fire department report. Again, Michael Lilienthal, I'm Deputy Chief at the El Dorado Hills Fire Department. And one of the things you may not know about our department, but we're real proud of, is we have a group of firefighters real passionate that have formed an honor guard years ago. And we are going to be assisting with the funeral services for Deputy Adam Gibson, who was killed January 18th at Cal Expo this coming Wednesday, actually. So we have a group of firefighters. They have a lot of training. They actually train other firefighters across the nation. We have some very involved people. And so it's a very somber moment for us, but we are very honored to be able to help in those type of situations. So something we're proud of your firefighters here in town for doing that this week. The other thing we have going is really on the COVID front, and Sita covers a lot of it. She's doing a great job with following what's going on there. But we are real involved with planning countywide for COVID vaccine delivery. Currently in the planning phase, we're working with El Dorado County Office of Education, trying to capture the teachers that need vaccination on the West Slope at least. And right now we think there's about 700 that need to be vaccinated. So we're going to try and work on that so that we can hopefully get the kids back in school for everybody. So that's a piece that we're actively involved with now. And then we're helping South Lake Tahoe and just some planning and some design for some mass clinics. And there's a mass vaccination clinic being planned at Red Hawk Casino as well. So there's some good planning going on to get that vaccine delivered. And I think Sita said it earlier well, and Supervisor Heidel, but we're really short on just having enough vaccine in the county. We have plenty of people willing to give shots and put these things together. We just need more vaccine. And your supervisors are doing what they can to help with that problem. And then on a real happy note, we've been able to vaccinate 310 firefighters across the county. That's from the Tahoe region all the way to El Dorado Hills. And this week we're doing the second doses of Moderna. I got my shot, my arm hurting right now, but I got it done today. And by the end of this week, I think all the firefighters in the county that were willing to get vaccinated will have had that done. So that's good for service delivery. It's good for not having firefighters off in quarantine and a lot of different reasons. And then on even a happier note, on January 23rd, we were able to vaccinate 397 seniors at Fire Station 86 on Bass Lake Road. And I got to tell you, that was a really neat drive-through event, but it was incredibly rewarding. The people were so appreciative. They brought us flowers. They were texting and calling. And, you know, I've been on 25 years almost, and it's one of the more memorable days of my career. So it was really great. I just wish we can magnify that number and do it all the time, because as many people as were able to help, it was readily apparent that there was a lot more that really wanted it. And so we are committed as your fire department to, whenever we can get vaccine, is to do what we can to help with that. So, and the chiefs made that message clear. We were able to use our new CERT team that the chief put in place, and that was a really effective tool. We teamed up with Rotary, and just a lot of great things came of that day. And I hope we can hit that repeat button and get it out as widespread and as fast as we possibly can. So that's the end of my report, but I'm open to any questions that you might have.
Questions for Chief Lilly?
I wanted to ask Glenn, do you know, are you guys in EOC talking at all about something John and I have chatted about briefly, just, you know, when they open up the online registration for like a one-day seniors vaccination clinic, some of the older seniors that might not be tech savvy might not be able to make that appointment as quickly. They might be maybe, you know, more vulnerable than some of the younger, because when they open up the 65 plus, kind of allowed that gap, and some of that feedback's coming in. I was curious if there's any way to prioritize them differently, or
Yeah, I know that there's been a lot of discussion there about how to solve that problem, and they're looking at other resources such as like libraries and helplines and different opportunities like that. But what you're identifying is a true problem, because a lot of your older senior population that really needs this vaccine is difficult for them to navigate through that registration process. You know, good point. I know they are looking at that. I don't know exactly what their plans are today, but I know it's a problem that they're trying to decompose and come up with solutions for.
yeah. I think I personally walked 3 seniors through the online process. Yeah.
It's very complicated, unfortunately. It is a state system, just for everyone's awareness, that we're using.
Okay.
So it makes it much more challenging to modify.
Yeah. Thank
And
you.
the county does have a phone number for those 75 and older. It's 530-295-4101, and that'll be on in the minutes. We'll provide that information.
Yes, we have staff from our library that's going to be manning the phone, as I understand it, and be able to respond to people to try to help them get navigated through, given the difficulties of the 8-page form, I think it is, and you don't get to determine if there's an appointment available to get to the 8th page and gone through all that. So I mean, it's totally constructed backwards, but the state put it together, and we have no control over how that happens. So we're trying to make it work. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate the report. Any other comments or questions of Chief Lilly from anybody? I'm not seeing hands up, and I'm not seeing anything.
No.
Okay, again, thank you. Let's move on to economic development. And Glenn, I know you got some charts you want to share with us.
That I do. Let me see if I can make this happen. Just take me a quick moment. There we go. Okay, hopefully you all are seeing that. This is a few slides out of a pretty big deck that Supervisor Heidel shared with me. Dr. Eiler at, I guess he's at Sonoma State, has been working with some of the North counties, Glenn County, Shasta County, Butte County, looking at their individual county data for what the pandemic has done to their economy. And there's also some state data as well. And it looks like they're going to be providing this data to our county soon. I'm not sure of the timeline. Supervisor Heidel might know a little bit better than I do. But this is an indication of employment levels in the recovering California. What they did was they looked at the Great Recession in 2007, and it took approximately 70 months to regain the same employment levels that we had. With the pandemic, it's obviously a much different looking curve where we had a dramatic drop off. And then it came back. It seems to be, fluttering a little bit. We're not sure where it's going to go, but right now our levels are near the bottom of where they were during the Great Recession. So we don't have the data. We don't know how long it's going to take, but we know it's going to be a while. We know it's been a very severe impact, not just nationally, but in California, but county by county. So we'll have some of this data. Here's an example of the North State counties. You can see Butte, Tehama County, Shasta, and the whole state, a breakdown kind of by industry segment. So I'll leave this up a little bit. No real surprises here. You see travel, leisure, hospitality, those were impacted the most. Retail in some areas has done fairly well. Financial activities. This has been an impact to lower income people more than higher income folks, as you'll be able to see in this next piece. This is an example of the K-shaped recovery that they're talking about. This is a statewide example, and then I'll show you a single county. But you can tell the higher wage earners earning over 60,000, which isn't necessarily that high, as we heard earlier. That's still below the median income for a family of four, well below that for our county. But negligible impact as far as the jobs in that wage category. The middle wage category, 27,000 to 60,000, they were pretty impacted. Now the low wages, those are your minimum wage folks. Those are the people, at the movie theaters, and a lot of the businesses that have been closed in the restaurants. And you can see they've had a really big impact, and they'll have a longer recovery. This next one was Butte County. Their low wage earners were hurt even more, and their upper wage earners actually are doing pretty well. So there's a lot of people hurting, and we don't know, because we've never seen this type of economic impact before, how long it's going to take to recover. El Dorado Hills, we do have a lot of high wage earners, but not everybody in El Dorado Hills, and not everybody in El Dorado County. This next piece is relatively interesting because of the squeeze, and because so many people doing well are moving from, let's say, San Francisco, which you can see for the prediction for this next year for their home value increases, are still going to increase in San Francisco significantly. But El Dorado County on the far left, you can see, is expected to increase about the most in the state. And I've heard some of the local realtors talking about El Dorado Hills even seeing a higher impact over the next year. So prices are going up, construction is down, permits are way down. That's another stat they'll be looking at. So there's a big squeeze at the bottom of the economic threshold for sure. The people at the top are doing fairly well, even during the pandemic. The middle is going to be sorted out, and we're going to see how that spreads out. But it's going to be a long recovery. Looking back at the Great Recession, we saw that it kind of took a long time. It was a real slow recovery. We're not sure about this recovery and how it's going to be impacted, and how it's going to help bring up especially the lower wage earners, because they may lag for a long time. So that's going to be interesting to see. Supervisor Heidel, I don't know if you have any input to when we would see some El Dorado County data, and I'm going to flip this off.
I haven't heard from Dr. Euler yet. I'll have to get back in touch with him. I know he was going to go ahead and prepare stuff, but there was no timeline. He's doing this gratis. We're not paying for it. So it may take a little bit longer with other things that he's doing, but yeah, we've been, basically they made a commitment to get it to us, at least the first round, but I'm always, interested in what happens after this, but we'll see how this goes. I think the El Dorado County numbers in particular will be extremely interesting, because now we can do a comparative with some of the other rural counties and really understand how we're doing. I'm sure we're not going to do as bad as Butte, but could look more like, one of the Tehama counties or others. So it'll be interesting just to get that comparison and understand what the recovery cycle will be. As you mentioned, that's the part to look at, in 6 months or a year, how are we doing again? So, yeah.
Right. And before this started, there was a lot of concern about affordable housing, about employment, where we're going to get a lot of these workers from. And this has really shuffled the whole deck, and we're not sure how it's going to come out, because we don't know what a lot of those low-income jobs are going to be like coming out of this pandemic. We don't know how many movie theaters and retail businesses and restaurants are going to be back. So these folks may be working in different fields, and there may be different opportunities, maybe better opportunities. But it's going to be an interesting time. There's one slide I left off because there were so many slides to go through. But their general prediction of the economy and jobs is they're looking towards the fourth quarter of 2024. So we see us returning back to where we were before this started. So hopefully well before that, people will be much healthier. But the economic piece is going to take some time, and there will be opportunities. There'll be opportunities for the county to address some of the things it does long-term looking forward to see what can be built or rebuilt. I don't know if that's the best term, but with any great disaster, there's opportunities to rebuild things and to make changes that you can't do at other times. A lot of changes went on in Europe after World War II, and their economies were completely devastated.
Yep. So questions or comments for Glenn? Anybody on the panel? Okay, seeing none. Do we have anybody else? I'm not seeing hands up or anything. So
no.
Well, thank you, Glenn, for the update, and we'll just continue to track that and continue to try to attract good businesses to El Dorado County, and particularly El Dorado Hills, that bring good jobs, right? Because that's going to help the employment cycle. So
we know we need to do that, and a lot of the things we don't know that we've discovered over the past year is what we don't know. We don't know. We just have to be patient and wait. But data like this will be helpful.
Yep. Very good. Thank you. Let's move on to infrastructure. John, I just listed the Bass Lake Road developments because you and I were on a walk with Raphael, and I thought there's several different subdivisions involved, so that's why I labeled it that way. So
yeah. Just backing up, last week at the Planning Commission, we had a general plan finding of consistency for the Village J7, which is right next to the Bridlewood subdivision, just to the southwest. And so a 10-foot general vacation, we were given of right-of-way, what they call a general vacation, and we were given much assurances from DOT and planning that was not going to affect any future road widening or pedestrian pathway or anything along those lines. So, and along that same stretch, Supervisor Heidel and I took a little field trip with Rafael Martinez, DOT director, and no guarantees or anything, but they're doing an initial look, because we had talked about this with J6 and J7 about pedestrian pathway from Bridlewood over to the new Safeway complex. And so Raphael and his group is looking at something, in a sense, behind the guardrail. There's a small little dirt path to maybe extending that for a possible cantilevered pedestrian pathway along there, along that portion along Bass Lake, Bass Lake Road at the Bass Lake area. So they're doing some initial review, looking at that on the feasibility for that. The key is they want to stay out of the wetland to minimize their environmental impact and the analysis they've got to do for that. So There also, there's been discussion about a potential roundabout at Bridlewood as well. As well as, with the park development and so forth and their access point and so forth. So just a few different things going on. I don't know if you wanted me to talk about anything else specifically, Supervisor Heidel, but that's just some of the moving parts that are happening at this point.
Yeah, your choice. If there's something else you think is, important to mention, please do.
Yeah. Not that I can think of that's in the hopper that I'm aware of. I know that, obviously the signal is up and going at Country Club. I know they split off the signal at the off-ramp and, they took it in as a capital project as well as the off-ramp and undercrossing widening. So I think their next step is, preparing plans and so forth for just the signal alone at the off-ramp, the eastbound off-ramp. So that's the only thing that I'm aware of. And then Silver Springs, the connection to Silver Springs Parkway, just north of Madera at the real sharp curve. Anyone who lives out there knows that's coming along, and I guess it should be done this summer, as far as I know. I don't know if we have a firm date on that, Supervisor Heidel or John Davey.
I was told July 4th.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that's going to change a lot of commute patterns, in my opinion. It'll be interesting to see a lot of people who live in that area who take Silva Valley as opposed to Cambridge or Cameron Park Drive. With that connection to Green Valley Road, and then school starting up again, I think we're going to potentially see some significant increases in traffic, in my estimation. So, but we'll see how that goes. So any other questions, infrastructure or the planning commission for me, feel free.
I kind of lost you for a bit, but did you talk about the CSD proposal for the Madera?
No, I didn't want to get into those details. I know that's ongoing. I know that I can speak to that if you'd like. So the CSD was looking to provide an access on opposite Madera. And DOT has, at this point, has determined that that's really not the ideal location. They would like to either see an access point opposite Bridlewood and potentially get some participation from the CSD for that roundabout, or at the Silver Springs connection at Bass Lake as well. And I'd like to see both access points, but I know that's kind of a low impact use, so they may not be required to provide 2 points of access, but either one of those. But just based on the location of the other access points, Madera would not be an ideal access point. And so that's the DOT has given the CSD that feedback at this point. So.
Yep, very good. So any other questions for John?
Hey, John, I'll ask a quick question. And you mentioned the new traffic signal at Country Club and Bass Lake Road. Well, I experienced it myself on Saturday, but some other residents have been mentioning it. The signal timing is a little odd there sometimes in terms of the switches in the ground. I pulled up to the intersection going southbound on Saturday. There were about 28 cars ahead of me. Pretty soon it was back to the fire station, and the signals cycled for every other direction except for southbound. People were driving in the median and just blowing through the red light. So who should I contact at DOT?
Well, I won't give the direct signal text number, but I would say Daryl Brown is in charge of traffic operations.
Okay.
And then the gentleman who works for him is the one who maintains the signals for DOT.
Yeah, it was an odd thing. I thought it was a one-off, but it happened to me once before too.
Well, and I get my friends telling me all the time who live in Bridlewood all the time about, I got held up by the signal again, so I get that a lot. So.
Okay.
Huh. Okay, anybody else? Questions, comments for John? All right, seeing none. Sita, did you have, let's go to good governance, mobile home parks, space rents analysis that you got involved with, Richard?
Okay, good evening, guys. The county council did touch upon the impact of AB 2782. And fundamentally, it was an effort to kind of create some sense of concern over equity as real estate development has focused on absorbing mobile home parks and capturing literally a captured population, because the homes are not so mobile, they are not movable, and those that are very expensive to move if you can find some place to move them to. So in some ways, they are prisoners of the condition. And with the real estate land values going up, those parks' raw land looked very valuable, particularly when it appears to have a captive audience of tenants. And I think AB 2782 was an effort to acknowledge that supply and demand is going to chase after land, but giving some minimal safeguards or equitable steps of mitigation, I think, was the intent. And apparently individual counties or cities have been trying to deal with this. And I believe this law was kind of a baseline approach. Mr. Livingston did kind of touch upon some of the things that are put into that relative to finding a means to allow valuations or compensation and what have you. I think, however, that given in particular areas anyway, the value of land is going to make this a continuing thing and also create some significant hardship stories, because those who reside in some of these parks, frankly, are in the lower income areas and are more likely to be elderly. So I don't think this has been fully resolved. I don't think it's gone away completely. And I think we will just see what happens. I sat in, a separate matter, sat in on the Board of Supervisors, basically self-assessment meeting they had on January 11th. And it was interesting because they do really get into the weeds as to how they operate and what should be their guidance on dealing with issues. And it's impressive to listen to them really dwell on and be concerned over sticking with county actions that support and advance the overall strategic plans, even when there are some immediate things that look like it would be much better to do this one thing or that thing that doesn't necessarily go in the same direction as strategic plan concerns. It was also interesting to observe, you got two new Board of Supervisors, and I think it was, from my opinion only, it was kind of interesting. They, I think, kind of showed up on the scene thinking that now they were king of the hill, and then only having to come to realize that they're one of five that have to figure out how to get things done together. And I think that is maybe the new learning process for anybody in any similar elected or appointed position. And that was good. I'll touch upon something else that we all are impacted on and frequently comes up at our meetings, but how the smaller counties, those that have smaller populations or rural populations, are really dominated by the larger populated elements and their representatives in the state. Recently, there was an article in the SAC-B as to how the funding from the CARES Act was distributed within the state, showing the great discrepancy per capita between larger and smaller counties, almost to the extent of almost 50% less to the smaller counties. Another thing that was obviously established by the state legislature in how to distribute that money. And we don't have to look far back to remember what our former Secretary of State and now Senator did relative to distributing funds to help the election process of the individual counties, rather than just spend it on one unapproved contract with a political consulting firm. That's still hanging out there, but as time passes, something tells me that will kind of evaporate in the smoke. And if any of us think back too far, remember when we were paying $120 a year for fire prevention fee assessments that also fell upon the smaller counties, because that's where the unincorporated areas and the state responsibility areas were. And we put that money in, and I think it was well over $1 billion during the course of that assessment into ultimately the state general fund. So I think this kind of abuse of the political majority is something that I think needs to be discussed a lot more. I know Kevin Kiley is coming by next month, and I think it would be interesting to get his perspective on what we here in the hinterlands might find as a more valuable tool to use to create a greater equity. That's kind of all I've got to add tonight, John.
Thank you, Richard. Questions for Richard? Panelists? Anybody on the phones? I'm not seeing any hands up or anything, so.
Nope.
Very good. Thank you for the report. Appreciate it. And Sita, did you have anything else on healthy communities? You kind of started with a lot of it.
Yeah, you were.
Yeah.
You started picking up where you left off right there, and I pretty much got most of it out. Yeah, I think when you mentioned that you sent a letter in to the governor, I thought that's very good timing, because we do have a very large senior population here, and they are prioritizing that within the CDPH, but that committee meeting I'm going to, they are starting to talk about other metrics now. So one thing they're talking about is kind of this, the HPI, the Healthy Places Index, as a way to allocate future doses and to prioritize counties that have a higher proportion of people in the lowest quartile of the HPI. So I don't know where El Dorado County fits in there, but it's kind of an interesting balance. If we have the highest senior population, if you really want to prevent the most deaths, I mean, we've talked about the science of it.
Yeah.
So I think that was good timing that you guys sent that in.
Okay, thank you for that add-on. With that, let's go to APAC. John.
Sure. Our APAC meeting in February is next Wednesday, the 10th. It's at 7 p.m. It's in another virtual room, not this virtual room. A lot of the same faces will be there, I'm sure. We will publish our agenda on Wednesday once we've confirmed the attendee, the primary project we're looking at. Last month we talked in depth, as it were, about the White Rock Road noise study report that we have a subcommittee of residents in that area very concerned about the impact from the Capital Southeast Connector JPA project there to convert White Rock Road to 4 lanes. To that end, we've invited the executive director of the Capital Southeast Connector JPA, Mr. Derek Minema. I never say his name right.
Minema.
Thank you. Let me trip on that. He had confirmed that he was going to come. I was trying to confirm today that he was still online for that. So once he confirms, we'll have the agenda out on Wednesday. And basically, he's going to give us an overview of where the JPA project is at right now, and that he might be able to respond to some of the issues that those residents in our subcommittee are concerned about in terms of, the currency of the sound studies, the impacts of those residents with sort of the shorter walls, and in conjunction with developments that have been there for a long time. When we look at the new developments in Blackstone, where they have very, very tall walls, and different mitigation measures to defeat some of those sound issues. So he's going to be attending. We'll be having a brief talk about looking for volunteers to work on some of our future subcommittees. We have a lot of projects coming up that are in sort of a holding pattern, but we'll be talking and reminding community members that we will need help on some of those projects as they're coming up. A lot of them are south of Highway 50 along Latrobe. And I did want to also chime in with that really good information that Commissioner Vigna shared. And I did see Supervisor Heidel and Commissioner Vigna out walking out in Bass Lake Road on Friday when I was driving past. I didn't honk. I didn't want to startle anybody. But, you know, that's an issue there. The neighbors we're always talking about traffic safety there. And I know that Ron had asked about the cleanup along Bass Lake Road. And so it's not safe enough to clean it up, but I guess it's not safe enough for sidewalks in the last 20 years either. So, but I did speak to DOT. They're sort of done right now for Silver Springs Parkway with the weather. They finished literally last Friday, I believe. And they'll be picking up again in probably March is what the expectation is. And they're eyeballing July 4th to finish up and have that done. So, and with that, that's what we have planned for APAC next week. We hope to see everybody there.
Hey, John, I just wanted you to know that I did encourage Rafael Martinez, Director of DOT, to also attend that meeting along with Derek Minima and stuff. And if he can, I encouraged him to have one of his staff there, because clearly our DOT should have been involved with all the environmental reviews, et cetera, and sound noise, sound wall mitigations, et cetera, should have been part of that. That all happened before I got on the board, so I don't know what level of participation or whatever, but so I'm expecting somebody to be there from the county as well as Derek. So.
Yeah, we were going to extend that invitation after Derek had confirmed. He pretty much just confirmed it, but we wanted to make sure that that we weren't intruding on his schedule. It is an after-hours event, so we will reach out to DOT to make sure that they're aware.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions for John? APAC.
Is that meeting this Wednesday or next week, John?
Next Wednesday.
Great,
it's
thank
10.
7 p.m.
Great, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other comments or questions.
Dick.
Okay, Richard, yes, please.
Yeah, couple clarification points. Sita, could you give that address slowly again for the contributions to the Holy Trinity student body?
Yes. That right. It is 3115 Tierra, that's T as in Tom, IERRA, Day, DE, and then Dios, DIOS, Drive, El Dorado Hills. And people can mail a check, just make it payable to Holy Trinity School. Or they can drop one off or drop off cash in an envelope or something, but make sure you give it to the front desk. And they can take donations through next week.
Okay, is something like that put out on Nextdoor? Do you know?
I'm going to put something out tonight. Yeah.
Outstanding. Okay, second clarification. I'm not sure whether Mike Lilienthal said this or Mr. Heidel. You said there was a county phone line for seniors who on the COVID. Is that, how do they distinguish calling?
Yes, it's only for those that are 75 and older. And the phone number is 530-295-4101.
4101. Okay, thank you.
Certainly. Okay, seeing no other comments or questions, let's move on to community information and outreach.
Okay, well, first I want to apologize for our technical difficulties. We'll get those fixed before next time. So hopefully if anybody who wants to listen back is going to be able to.
Oops, she just.
Technical difficulty.
I mean, couldn't be any more perfect. Well, let's give it a second here. Any other good jokes or what?
Okay.
I think we're back. Sorry.
It's to me. So, anyways, yes, hopefully we won't have this problem next time. Regarding and I want to again thank everybody because you guys do provide such amazing information. So it's very useful for all of our constituents. So thank you all. As far as community information and outreach, the majority of stuff is just we've been trying to get out anything related to the COVID vaccines. And that's pretty much all that we've been doing, putting out whatever Carla Haas, the community or the communications director puts out. If she doesn't have specific stuff, we get that out as much as possible. So that has been the main thing that we've been working on. So.
As we see stuff from the insurance commissioner or something like that affecting, insurance rates, we probably put those out too to make sure everybody gets them, but those have been few and far between as opposed to, like Cindy said, all the COVID stuff. It's just over the top, but anyway. All right, very good. Any go backs for anybody? Not seeing hands up. So I just want to mention in terms of council member items, our next meeting is Monday, March the 1st. So it's 2 first of the month meetings back to back, since February has 28 days, as we all remember, unless it's a leap year. And I have a tentative invitation to Assemblyman Kevin Kiley. He has not responded to me, and I'll tell you, it's been over a week. But with all the lawsuit activities and other things going on, this may not be the best timing for him. So I'm not going to commit to having him in here in March. I need to try to reach him again and see if this is going to work. We may have to schedule him to a later date, but if that's the case, we will try to find somebody else to be a guest speaker and share information that's valuable to our community. So we'll have to play that one out as it goes through the month here. So Richard.
Yeah, something just struck me, John. Now, there's been 2 consecutive meetings where people have asked about roadway cleanup and wanting to do, quote, with volunteers and the danger and all that stuff. Is there a component of our DOT that is tasked with cleaning up the roadways? That's their function?
No, it's not their function. In fact, most of the cleanup that's done where people are dumping trash, and I'm talking mattresses and that stuff, is environmental management's role. And in the past, environmental management has been able to get crews to help from the prisons or whatever, CCC, but those guys, there's not very many people in prisons anymore, right? And then the CCC Corps and that sort of thing, they're doing a lot of wildland clearance and other things. So the availability of those inexpensive resources or volunteer resources, if you want to call it volunteer, is almost nil today. Sheriff can't even get help for doing this stuff. So it kind of falls down into a volunteer area, but I always wonder what the education is. Why is it that people have to throw out all their trash? Why aren't they out cleaning it up, right? There's got to be some consequences for people who just repeatedly do this every day, and there doesn't seem to be, right? We have to go out and do it to clean up after people who don't care. So I'm trying to figure out what the educational process is to get people to care. Years ago, we didn't have a trash problem. When I was a kid, I'll tell you, the roads were pretty clean. People thought about it, they cleaned up their stuff. Even out in the orchards, they cleaned up their stuff and took it home with them, all right? That's gone away. So our societal changes, it seems to be like, it's just okay to throw trash everywhere. And I don't get it. Why? So I'll get off the soapbox, but that's where I think the need is educate. It's just going to increase, which requires more volunteers if you don't get the root cause. So what's the root cause here? That's what I'm trying to ask. Too many fast food joints, I guess. Maybe that's it.
Something to that.
Okay, any other final comments, thoughts before? Yeah, John.
Sorry, I had one. I know last month I had mentioned for public comment about the El Dorado Hills monument sign on the south side of US 50.
Yes.
So our volunteer group, we've reached out to a lot of different entities. I've talked to Debbie Manning at the chamber. They're very engaged. We've talked to the El Dorado Community Foundation. Talked a little bit to Alan Priest too, since he's involved with so many nonprofits. Our volunteer group on Saturday will be out painting the sign, getting the pink off. That's about all we can do. The sign structurally is failing. So that's our first baby step. So if you see people out there with paint cans, we're not vandalizing. We're cleaning up. The construction fencing has to remain in place just because of the liability to the Rolling Hills CSD, as well as the structure continuing to fall apart. So we did actually reach out, and one of our volunteer members works for a commercial sign company, and the owner of his company was one of the owners of El Dorado sign back in 1960, I want to say 3, that built both signs. Now he's in his 80s, so his recall is probably better than mine, but he's not exactly sure on this construction, but at least we have a little bit of information there about the timing and how they were constructed. So some cleanup this weekend.
Okay.
Going forward, there'll be some other activities.
Been working with Cheney Hicks, so she's in the loop for Rolling Hill CSD, right?
Yeah, we have to. Yeah, I sat in on their board meeting a couple weeks ago, so we're doing what we can do within the restrictions they have upon their organization.
Very good, much appreciated.
Okay. think we went
Oh,
dark
we
again.
lost him again. Okay, I think that was about it. That's a
I
good
move we
ending, huh?
adjourn.
So let's just signal to Heidel that we're saying good
Bye.
night and
Good night,
goodbye.
everybody.
Good night.
See you guys
All right.
later.
We're adjourned.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Did they want volunteers for that?
I don't know.
We have a small group, so we're
Okay,
okay.
do you need volunteers or no?
No, we probably have too many right now.
Okay.
Well, thank you for all your efforts. That's much appreciated. Somebody needed to step up and help them out. I'm surprised it wasn't coming from Rolling Hill CSD, but
I'm doing
everybody
precious
knows
little. Precious little. Most of us are just complaining, so, but we'll be out with paintbrushes, so don't be alarmed.
no
Okay,
problem.
thank you.
I will report you. Good night, all.